Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining me as we hang out with our special guest tonight on Sounds of the Diaspora, artist to artist conversation with yours truly, Dion Parson. I'm really happy that I'm able to have this amazing musician here with me tonight, someone that I've known since I got to New York, kind of like a big brother to me. You know, I used to go and check him out and play. And he's been a big influence in my life. And he's an amazing saxophonist, a composer, arranger, and an educator, and a dear friend. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Vincent Herring to the show.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Hey, Vincent, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. Happy to be alive and breathing and doing well.
Good, good, good. How things in New York, man?
Cold.
You look cold.
I had dinner with my son last night, and he built a house down in Texas. And he said, "Yeah, when I flew in this morning, it was a little difficult. It was almost 80 degrees." I was like, "Gee, thanks, James."
Well, I'm down here in the islands. We're a little more than 82.
That's a daily thing for you, okay?
Yeah, having fun down here, man. But listen, man, it's so good to see you. It's been a while, man, and thanks again for coming on the show, and we look forward to talking to you about some great things. I know our audience are excited, and they're like, you know, they're really excited to know about, like, who's Vincent Herring? You know, how did you become this amazing saxophonist? Can you know, I knew you picked up the saxophone at age 11, but, you know, tell us briefly about your upbringing on the instrument.
Well, you know, my mom was a single mom, and my parents were divorced when I was around 3, and my dad remained in Kentucky, which is where I was born. And my mom moved to Los Angeles to live with some relatives temporarily until she could find a place. So her outlook on things was to try to keep me busy, to keep me from getting into trouble, even though I was a fairly nice guy anyway, but she was determined to keep me on track. And so she thought that I should play violin. This was in the 4th grade. And I wanted to play the violin. I was like, yeah, cool, no problem. And something happened at school, and I wasn't able to get into the program. It was a very limited program at that age. And so I didn't think twice about it. And some time went on. And when I got to the 7th grade, we moved to a town called Vallejo. Actually, we moved there earlier, but Vallejo's in Northern California. And so, you know, she said, you should join the band and stuff. But I already had that kind of thing in mind anyway. Now, here's the funny part. So I go to sign up for band, and I sign up for advanced band. Never played an instrument, never saw an instrument, had no idea. But I signed up for advanced band, and my thinking was, you know, I was in a gifted program in the school. And I said, well, it'd be silly for me to sign up for beginning band, because surely I will have all of this figured out in a week or so. And so I saved them the headache of having to redo my schedule and put me in advanced band.
Right.
So first day, go to school. And at that time, California had a pretty good inventory of instruments or whatever you wanted to play. And I signed up for the saxophone and a tenor saxophone, and the guy gave me a number, and you go to the back to get a horn. And I'm looking at how the other guys put it together, and I put it together like that. And so all of a sudden, I go and I sit down, and we're playing a piece. And when we play the piece, he stops the band and he says, "Saxophones, play this section." And we all played. And then he said, "Tenor saxophones, play this section." And then he said, "You play this section." I'll do it like in a few days.
Let me go figure it out, right?
Do it right now. I couldn't play at all. And so not only did he kick me out of band, but he said I could not join beginning band until I got a teacher.
Okay.
That was the beginning of my music career. And so my motivation was not anything musical or sensible. My motivation was, I'll show them.
Right.
Practice.
How dare you kick me out of band?
Exactly. And at that age, in most situations, if your kid is practicing 2 hours a day, that's an hour and a half more than anybody else. And so you get a little bit better. And sure enough, the next year, I auditioned for band again, and then I got into the advanced band, and I was cocky as ever, you can imagine. And I just kept progressing, and then all of a sudden, some people started talking about jazz and stuff, and I was like, yeah, I wasn't really into that, but when they would show me some things, I'd be like, oh, I know that song, because my mom was playing all of this stuff all the time, because she's a serious jazz fan. So, you put on Art Blakey record, I was like, I know all of that. Ornette Coleman, Coltrane, Freddie Hubbard, Stanley Turrentine. It didn't matter because, I had been hearing all this stuff all the time.
Right.
And, I grew up in the beginning of the smooth jazz era. And I had a job in a music store. And when the music store would close, I would turn up all the sound system and I'd practice, and be playing along with the radio and all these tracks. And I used to have a great time doing that. And I just really enjoyed it. And I was a fairly organized practicer, and I practiced and I just kind of stayed with it and started advancing more than most of my peers, just because, just a little, just a little bit goes a long way.
Right.
And then when I got into high school, and this is pretty interesting. My mom got a little intoxicated one night and gave me the money to go get a saxophone, a professional saxophone. She had bought me a student model horn, but I wanted a professional model horn, and that was a lot of money. And so she, I forgot how she ended up having the money, but she had a soft spot, and she gave me the money to get it. She knew, how much it was, like $1,600 or $1,700. I got it right away. And next day she said, "Hey boy, you still got that money?" I was like, "I got the horn." So then I got my first professional horn. How old was I? Maybe, I don't know, maybe 14 or 15. And I really loved it. And I started practicing, and I got a very good saxophone teacher. I went into Oakland, California, which is, I would take the Greyhound bus from Vallejo to Oakland. I guess that's about, I think, maybe 20 miles. It wasn't so far, but this was something I would do. And there was a saxophone teacher named Hal Stein, which is someone I had found on some CDs, and I started studying with him. My actual first teacher was a guy named David Peterson, and David Peterson was a woodwind specialist, and his father also played woodwinds. So they mostly did Broadway shows and things of that nature. And I learned great mechanics on how to produce sound, on saxophone technique. So I was just very fortunate that I had him as a teacher. There were other people around. There was a guy named Billy Browning. Billy Browning was a saxophone player who used to teach at Sonoma State, and he had the program there. So when I was in high school, it would be me and maybe one other guy. I think you know Gary Fisher, piano player.
Yeah.
Gary, because Gary and I, we grew up in the same area.
Okay.
And so Gary and I, we played in this band when we were in high school. We go to play with the junior college band. And, so it was a great experience. And Billy would have me over to his house. Nicest guy you ever want to meet, man. And so I had, some great nurturing and mentorships, people that really helped me out and try to nurture my interests and talents along. And eventually I got scholarship offers to go to school. And being a parent now, I can tell you, far too young to even remotely consider, school. Maybe your musical ability is here, but your ability is down here.
Right. Yeah.
So that was, it was an experience, but it wasn't the right one for me. And that's how I kind of got going and doing, that was my beginnings.
That's a great beginning, man. So you studied with one teacher that played Broadway shows. So at that point, did you start doubling at that time or checking out other woodwind instruments, or you just stuck to the saxophone?
Well, this particular teacher was very, very good. And he said things to me like, if you want to do Broadway and stuff, you need to double. So he did get me playing flute and clarinet, and I was playing it. But of course, my heart was really into playing the saxophone. So I took one of these scholarship offers, and it was to a place called Cal State University in Chico. And I went there, and being cocky, I majored in clarinet. And
Okay.
and played clarinet and flute, and I stayed there until I auditioned for a band. It was advertised at the United States Military Academy at West Point, and they were holding auditions, and so I was one of the ones. I sent a tape in, and they selected my tape. They would fly 20 people in. So, I don't know how many applied, but they flew me in, and at the audition, the only people you might know, James Shirillo,
I don't
James
know James Shirillo.
plays with Lincoln Center band. There was James Kamak, bass player with the Jamad.
Yeah, I played with him. Yeah,
he was in the band.
He spent some time with Ahmad Jamad.
Yeah, exactly. And Doug Lawrence.
Yeah.
Doug was my kind of like handler to make sure I didn't get into trouble. Okay. So,
but why West Point? You just that's like you just
no. Let me explain to you. So, the Army has, I don't know, 50 bands, and they you have one specialty band. The Navy has 50 bands. They have one specialty band. So like the Navy's band is the Airmen of Notes. No, that's the Air Force. So they all have one specialty band. And the difference is, if you go into the Army and you want to play music, they put you in a band. You go in as a E1, enlisted rank 1, and they send you to an Army music school. And after that music school, you get placed, you go to a corporal, and then they place you in a band somewhere. In the specialty bands, you go in as a E6, and you don't have to go to music school, and they place you in this thing. But you do have to go through the basic training and everything, and I went through all of that. And when I got my orders, the drill sergeant was pissed because he'd been in the Army for 20 years. He's an E5, and I'm like just getting out of there. E6 for what? He was like, so that was, it was bad news. So it was a great situation that I was not a cadet in the sense of going to school there as a formal student. However, they would pay for everything. So I could go to school, I could take private lessons, all kind of stuff. So I was taking clarinet lessons from Eddie Daniels, who's an amazing
Yeah.
clarinet player. I was taking saxophone lessons from Phil Woods, and that relationship went on past the Army. And who did I study flute with? No one of note, but I just did it for fun.
Right.
And to tell you a funny story about Eddie Daniels. So I had what's called a Selmer tri-pack, and it held my alto saxophone, my flute, and my clarinet. So when I would come to lessons, I would have all three. And I took my clarinet, and Eddie said, "Hey, let me hear you play alto." I'm like, no, I'm just on my clarinet lessons. Let me hear you play alto. And this was every week he would say this to me, right? So one week I decided, I was kind of feeling good. I took it out and we played Lady Bird, right? We played it. He played piano. He said, "You got bad time, man. Bad time. You're playing bad notes. Bad time, bad notes." I was like, "See, that's why I didn't want to play, man." But he was probably right, but it was it was an amazing time, to learn. And I'm grateful that I had the experience to study with those amazing musicians, amazing artists. And my relationship with Phil Woods, maintained for the rest of his life, and one I'm very grateful for.
That's great, man. Beautiful story. I didn't know the details of it. I just knew West Point. I actually thought you went there as a cadet.
Yeah. People
think
yeah,
that.
people assume that,
Yeah.
and but that's not the case. So I want to clear that up. You go in; it's just you just happen to be the specialty band happens to be based at West Point,
Right.
but you're an enlisted soldier with the Army ranks. You have E enlisted class. I think it goes E1 all the way to E8, I believe, and that's the highest. And then there's the O ranks, officers, which starts at a second lieutenant, then first lieutenant, then captain, then major, lieutenant colonel, colonel, general 2-star, general 3-star, general 4-star, general 5 stars. So that's the hierarchy of that system.
Great. So to jump forward, man, thanks for sharing that. But to jump forward, I want to get you to New York, so you get to New York and then you go to college in New York and you get in the New York scene and then just everything just kind of explodes. So
it's a little different than that.
okay.
When I was at West Point, I realized this was a terrible fit because this is the Army for real. Even though it's a great gig, because basically when we weren't playing concerts, we were rehearsing all day. Well, not all day, but 7 in the morning starting. And they'd buy like every chart and you just read all day. So that was good for me.
Right.
And then they would do concerts at Cleveland Shopping Center or something. They do concerts. And once in a while we'd have assignments like a dance or something for the general, things of this nature, private party, a small group, and I remember Fort Drum is upstate New York near Canada. And there was a changing of the guard of the leader of the base, and the general was changing, and they flew us up for ceremony in the cold in a helicopter. We get there, we got to play, and you know how it is to play an instrument in the cold. So it was terrible, but we do things like that. But you had to stay ready, even though, as I'm told, they would never, ever, ever, ever ship anyone in a specialty band anywhere, to fight. Even though technically you're in the Army, they
Right.
could,
Right.
but they wouldn't do that with a specialty band. You're in a regular band, they will ship your ass out somewhere to fight, and you had to stay ready. There was either annual or biannual fitness tests that you had to maintain. And I will say one thing, but when I was in the Army, I could knock some pull-ups out and everything else. And they had a thing called the squat thrust.
Well,
And,
do you still have the gym in your crib? Because I know you used to have a whole gym in your basement for a minute.
well, times change, and there's like a kind of fancy gym near me. Just a little bit different. My son built a house in he's in Frisco, Texas, which is outside of Dallas. And when he was having the house built, yes, he had a gym built in the crib. So when I went there, I was like, James, what is this? He's like, what does it look like? So he maintains his fitness that way. And so I believe in kind of trying to stay in shape and that kind of a thing.
That's great. That's great. That's good. Well, you've always, been, health conscious and those type of things, which is great, man. Which is not the norm for most jazz musicians because cats are hanging out all night and partying and stuff. So you've always had a different, how you roll differently, with your own thing, which has been it worked for you. So that's great, man. But you've done so many great projects, and you've been the mantle has kind of been passed to you, especially through the Cannonball, Legacy project that you still do with Louis Hayes. But tell us briefly about your relationship when you met Nat Adderley and how that came about to where you are today with that project still.
Okay, when I got out of the Army, I started working at a place called Penton Software. And Penton Software, we sold a product called the Maintenance Master. And this is really funny. At that time, the IBM System 34 and 36 ran most, programs for machines, things. And the PC was the computing power was getting more and more. And so this program called the Maintenance Master ran on you installed it on the series of floppy disk and it would run this maintenance program. Now, this sounds like an app today, but at the time, what it would do was like when you would register the details of your machinery, so such and such machine after 200 hours, you got to change the belts, you got to oil at this amount of time, so it's called Maintenance Master, and it would keep the scheduling for all this heavy machinery. And like one of our clients was Duracell. That was a big client for us. And so it was actually a pretty good gig. I can't believe I got this gig. I had a minimum amount of computer skills, which at that time was nobody knew anything, and
which was a lot.
I knew that much, so that I would get that job. And this is not to get sidelined. I could remember the company sending me out to buy a hard drive, a 20 gigabyte hard drive. I'm like, man.
About this big, right?
It was about that big, that deep, and it was super expensive. It's like, this was for the company. This is a big thing, a 20 gigabyte hard drive. When we think, wait, I'm sorry, 20 megabyte hard drive. It wasn't gigabyte. Right. No, that gigabyte, that was 10 years later. No, this was megabyte. I kid you not, man. And that's where things were at the time. But anyway, so I had this job, and it, was a decent job. We flew around the country selling this Maintenance Master package. And at some point, I would see these bands playing on the street. And I saw there was a saxophone player named Larry Smith. And Larry Smith was a friend of Sonny Stitt's, and he played great. And I
Mm.
was so shocked at how well he played. And I listened to him, and I asked him if I could take a lesson with him. He said, yes. I said, well, how much? And he charged? He said, turkey sandwich and a beer. I was like, okay, we can work that out. But he was a tremendous player, and so I would hear these bands, and so after work, because I wasn't really playing so much, I would take my horn, and after work, I would sit in and play with these bands that were playing on the street, or
Mm.
the one or two particular
Right.
bands. And I didn't realize they were actually making money on the street. I was like, wow, it's funny. And so on a weekend, I would play with them, and I actually got paid. And I was like, wow, can't believe these guys are making this much money. It wasn't that much money, like
Mm.
$150, but it seemed like a lot at the time.
Right.
And so after a while, I started thinking, man, I could leave my gig and do this and practice. And I got a NEA grant to study. And when I got that NEA grant, I was like, okay, I could really practice and just work on playing music. And so I'll play on the street, and I'll practice. So then I left the job, and that's what I did. I just practiced and then played on the street. And then as I was getting better and better, eventually things started happening. The first gigs I got were like some avant-garde gigs, with
Mhm.
David Murray, with I don't know if you know Beaver Harris. He was a drummer.
Yeah.
Yeah, with Beaver Harris. Some things with Don Pullen,
Hmm.
and these were the kind of gigs that the doors opened for me. And I
Okay.
continued to practice, and eventually Walter Booker, bass player,
Mhm.
heard me on the street, and he stayed there listening, and then he said to me, "Hey man, you know any Cannonball?" I said, "Sure." He said, "You know any of them songs?" I said, "Yeah." I didn't know who he was, and he said, "Man, Nat Adderley would love you." And I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah, I want you to come over to my place and play for Nat." So I went to his studio, which was on the Upper West Side, and played for Nat over the phone or something. And that was, nice about it, but you know, some kid playing over the phone. So he happened to be playing in New York a week or two later, and he said, "Yeah, come down and sit in." So I came down there to sit in, and Nat was like, "Oh, I forgot all about you, man. Oh, I'm so sorry about that." That's all right. I'll be back tomorrow. And I came back next night, and and I could play, not well, but it was a certain kind of enthusiastic attitude that I had about life, about music, about everything. And sure enough, and so Nat at that time, he didn't really have a band. After Cannonball died, he didn't have a band. He would just do projects. So
Mhm.
some friends, which was Larry Willis, Walter Booker, and Jimmy Cobb, and Sonny Fortune, they would just do gigs whenever he would have a gig, which was not that often. And so, sure enough, Sonny couldn't make a job in Florida, and Nat called me. I was like shocked. Sure, can you make it? Absolutely. And
Right.
he said, "All right, well, I got to tell the people something about you. What have you done?" I said, "Well, I work with Beaver Harris." He said, "Man, only Beaver these people know is on the cover of the magazine." Yes.
I hear you.
So I went down there to Florida. What was that for? I forget the company was for, but we played. And instead of going right back to New York, I went to Lakeland, Florida, which is where he lived, and I stayed with him for, I don't remember how long, maybe a week, and we just really just hit it off as like just mentor, you know,
Mhm.
uh, father son kind of relationship. And I would be asking him a million questions about him and Cannonball and how they grew up and why did they practice this and it's just so. His wife shared with me at the time that, you kind of rejuvenated Nat and got him wanting to play again. And I was like, Nat, so why don't we do some gigs, man? Like some tours and stuff. He's like, oh, I thought we can do some tours and everything. It'd be great. And so he didn't have anything. We do like one gig here, university over Texas or something. Nothing really. A one gig per 3 months, right? But we talk every day, and we'd be on the phone for hours, just talking about life. And I really just loved talking to him. And I just thought, man, this is the nicest guy in the world. And generally, I felt that way. And I just really admired him such a great deal. So sure enough, I finally get the gig with Art Blakey. I'm so happy. And I call up Nat. I said, Nat, I finally got the gig with Art Blakey. Oh, that's good. And we were working at Sweet Basil's. And we were there for about, it was like a few weeks. I think it was, the Christmas.
December run through New Year's, yeah.
Yeah, through New Year's, exactly. And then, so, New Year's I call Nat. Hey, Nat, guess what? So I'm going to Europe with Art. And he said, when you going? And I told him the dates. He said, no, you're not. I said, yes, we are. I just spoke to Art. He said, no, we going to Australia. So that's fork in the road. Because I had been on him to please, let's do some tours and stuff. So he finally hooked up something. So, and like I say,
you had no idea he was working on it.
I didn't know it was even coming up, but my friendship with Nat was very special. And so I couldn't say no. And it was a fork in the road. I wanted to continue working with Art, but I couldn't, at least not for this tour. So when Art came back from Europe and I came back from Australia, I went to Nat's house. Not to Nat, to Art's house. At that time, he had moved from Bleecker Street, and he was in the building where Monica Lewinsky ended up living. I forget what that's called, but it was kind of a new apartment building at the time, and he had a penthouse in that. So, wow, that's pretty nice. In fact, the first time I saw Art Blakey, he was playing at McHale's, and he had a black Rolls Royce. And so years later, I would tell that story to some guys in the band. Say, man, they repoed that thing after the first time. I was like, come on, man, But anyway, so I went to his apartment with my wife at the time, and so he answered, sent him up and went up, and rang the doorbell. He didn't even look at me. He looked at her. What's your name, darling? And they grabbed her hand. Come on in. I'm like, Mr. Blakey, I'm so sorry that I couldn't make the tour. And so he just talking to my ex, just talking to her. And then so finally, after a while, we go in another room and we have a talk, and he can care less. Art can care less. He wasn't thinking about any of that shit, man. And but the next thing that he had, I couldn't make again. So that was it, man. So either you're a messenger or you're not. So I was like, well, I really want to do it. And in Bern, Switzerland, what's the name of that hotel? Books a week,
I know what you're talking about. I know exactly. Marion's.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
Marion.
At one time, when you would play there, you had a choice of staying there at the hotel or down in the town. And there was a hotel. And at that hotel down in the town, they had a poster on the wall from some jazz festival, Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, Vincent Herring. Oh, I was like, oh. So, and people come up to me once in a while. I saw you in Norway with Art Blakey. I'm like, I might have been on the program, but I was not on that.
You wasn't on the gig.
I was not on the gig. But
so you're the ghost messenger, huh?
Yeah. So but all of that stuff was a good experience. But working with Nat was very important for me. And like I say, he was just a wonderful human being, and I just admired him such a great deal, not only musically but just as a man, and I appreciated him being my friend and showing me the ropes. Even though when I left the band, he got unbelievably upset, So
Mm.
that's another story. But yeah, it was a great experience, and like I say, that music was dear to my heart anyway. So it wasn't like I had something to learn. It was just something I was doing, and I
Right, right,
appreciated doing it, a natural way for me to play. And not that I was the best player, but like I say, we had a relationship that if you had come along and played 10 times better, it wouldn't have mattered, and
right,
and
right.
so he had a box of people that would send him tapes like all the time.
Mm.
And yeah, boy, sending this stuff, and I'd listen to it. Damn, it got sound good, man. Sound like Cannonball. He's like, well, that's what I like about you. You don't sound like Cannonball. He said, you feel like Cannonball, but you don't sound like Cannonball. I'm like, what the hell does that mean?
Mhm.
It's like, you have your own notes, but you have the feeling and the flavor of Cannonball. And I'm like, well, I was trying to play like Cannonball, but yeah. So, but no, but I appreciated that, and it allowed me to develop. He certainly heard something in me that was worthwhile developing, and then, like I say, my personal relationship with him was very special. And so that was pivotal and important, time in my life was spending with him.
That's great, man. And it's funny, man, because I think like all the cats have some type of mentorship like that along the way. Arthur Taylor used to say, you know, that apprenticeship was the key to the music, because that's the system that he came up under. Having that apprenticeship. Michael Carvin used to mention the same thing to me as well. Because he was very close to Papa Joe Jones. So you know when you look at all of the cats, like especially our age, everybody has that mentor, that was there along with them. Because when we came up, even though school was, we all went to school and studied, but it wasn't as prominent as it is now. Right now, it's
No,
like you go
no,
to college and you get your gigs from college, and
correct. No, very, very different. And
very different,
in
man.
fact, school was had almost had nothing to do with playing. Uh, it was, wasn't
It was
about.
part of the process, but it got you. It gave you some type of foundation, but you still had to go on the scene. Like you had to go to New York, and you had to go to McHale's, you had to go to Carlos One, you had to go to Sweet Basil's. Smalls didn't exist. The Vanguard, Bradley's. You had to make your rounds and sit with the cats and spend time. You had to build relationships.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of AT, I have to tell you this one story. So we'd be rehearsing forever with Arthur Taylor, and
Every day, right?
yeah, almost every day. And a lot of guys in the band smoked,
Mhm.
and I didn't smoke.
Mhm.
And they would be practicing in this room. I'm like, man, I can't breathe in here. And, it's like, so it was problematic, but whatever. We rehearsed all the time. And he used to like to rehearse two bass hit. Da, 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 da. And no matter how well we played, he was like, let's try it again from the top. What was wrong with that? Let's try it again from the top. Guys, he just liked to
Just
play.
like to play,
I didn't understand that at the time, but that's what that was. So sure enough, we were rehearsing, let's say January, and we got a gig April 9th, right?
yeah.
And so I said, AT, man, I'm not going to be able to make that gig in April. What's the problem? I said, well, I have a tour in Europe, and it's like 3 weeks, and it's, I'm not going to be able to make that date. Well, we've had this gig for months. I said, well, AT, I know, but the gig is like 3 months away, and I'm just not going to be able to make that. Man, this is, about this gig for months. I'm like, AT, I can't do it. So I get a call from Jackie McLean, and Jackie calls me, hey man, AT told me you're getting a big head. I said, what do you mean? He said, he told me you're getting a big head. I said, no, this was probably about the tour and the gig. And I explained to them, them old cats, man, messing with me to death, man. And, but it was, I enjoyed those rehearsals with AT, it was a good experience. And let me see, it was Mark Curry, Willie Williams,
Tyler Mitchell on bass.
Tyler Mitchell, that was the band. And it was good, but
I used to sit on the mailbox on 157 and listen to the band because I lived in the building right next door.
Oh, okay.
That was my, I used to sit there, and then the band would come down. I missed you a couple of times, but the band would come down after rehearsal, and they do say, "Yeah, you heard this shit, Lee."
You lived up there, right?
Yeah, Mark and I lived in the same building around Blake, and I were roommates. Yeah,
Okay.
And that was the connection up to and then Pelt moved into the neighborhood when he moved to New York. He lived like 2 blocks up. Yeah.
Wow.
But great times, man. Great times, beautiful stuff. We've been talking for a while, and I know our audience, they're like, okay, Vincent, you've been talking all this stuff. We want to hear you play.
Okay.
So we got some music. You shared some music with us. So we got 20 something minutes to run through all of this music. So let's start with Dudley's Dilemma. Let's play that, and then we'll talk briefly about it. Okay, let's check this out. Dudley's Dilemma. That's Dudley's Dilemma, Vincent Herring.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, a great band, man. What's the concept, or who's Dudley? Should I ask?
It's actually pronounced Doodley.
Oh,
And,
Dudley.
and he's just a friend of mine I've known for years. When he lived in New York, he used to play with art foreman Benny Golson a little bit.
Okay.
And he lives in Vienna, Austria. He's actually from Switzerland. And we formed projects and did projects together for many years, and we used to have a cooperative band together. And so Doodley's Dilemma, the story behind that is he has a daughter. And this daughter, of course, I knew her as a baby. She used to run and give me so many kisses and hugs and sit on my lap, couldn't get rid of her, right? And this was going on for years, right? So cut 20 years later, daughter's looking you eye to eye, and daughter's about 20, and she's beautiful. And she runs over and gives me a kiss, and he's like, and then so she's like, Daddy, I want to be a singer. And he's like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. So that's Doodley's Dilemma is,
He wants to be a musician.
yeah, exactly. Just what he wanted,
Right. Hey, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, So did she become a singer?
She is a singer. I'm not sure that I would say that that's her total profession or whatever. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But yeah, she does that. I mean, how old is your son now?
15.
Yeah, I'm sure he plays music of some sort. It's like music should be a part of any formal education. I mean, thorough education. Doesn't mean very few people are going to be professional musicians.
Yeah, we know that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's okay. But at least you have an ability to appreciate and understand. And I remember when my son was in school, where he went to school, it was mandatory for him to take dance and theater, and he had to take 2 years of dance, and so they offered different disciplines, and one was African dance. And so he calls me up. He said, Dad, I didn't get African dance. I'm like, okay. He said, no, you don't understand. They want to put me in like ballet or modern dance. I'm like, man, I got nothing to do with it. Dad, you got to get me out of this.
You don't want to do any plie? I mean, come on.
But here's what happened. So he ended up, I think, taking modern dance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe 1 year. I think 1 year dance, 1 year theater. Mandatory. So they didn't have choice. And so years later, a friend of ours was having a dance recital. And my wife says to me, we got to go to their dance recital. I'm like, oh, my eyes roll. I'm like, yeah, be kidding me. Why don't I just pick you up after? No, we're all going. I'm like, Jesus Christ. At that dance recital, no one enjoyed it more than my son. He was like,
wow.
He was like, they were so great, Dad. I'm like, stop, James. You know, like he genuinely enjoyed it, and he said it was beautiful, and he so appreciated it. And it's kind of like everyone studying music have another level of appreciation for what we do.
You can be a connoisseur of the music, man. Not like you said, not everyone's going to be a
Oh,
performer, but
very few. We
need to tell the audience that's part of it as well. So
yeah, so I really believe in music being part of the education, just like everything else. Like my daughter, she somehow excels in using words, and it's reflected in her profession. My son in numbers, it's reflected in his profession, and they both have a love of those two disciplines, and that's where life took them. But both played music, and but that was that.
That's great. Well, thanks for sharing the background behind Doodley's Dilemma. And that's from your album Preaching to the Choir, which we're going to play the title track now, and then we can talk about it. So let's check out, let's listen to Preaching to the Choir. Love the groove. Love the groove. One of our listeners commented that they love the groove. This moves away from smooth jazz and goes back to its roots. There you go. Great horn, bro. Great composition. Did you arrange it too? That's your original composition, yeah.
Yeah. I gave you all original compositions.
Yeah, great. Love it. Yeah, man. Great stuff. Long day. Finally, I can relax. Thank you.
The next song that you play, can you play Sophia Marie?
Oh, it's you want to do Sophia Marie?
Is that problematic?
That's we're gonna get to it.
Okay.
Actually.
Right,
We'll get to it. We'll squeeze it in. Yeah.
Right.
You know, we try to keep the conversation short, but you know, you had so much interesting information to share with us, which is great, man. You know, I'm gonna say, man, what's so good about this show for me is that I get to connect with my brothers and I learn things about, you know, about you guys that I mean, how many times we sat in a room and, you know, backstage for a gig and in rehearsals, and most of the times we really talk about music, occasionally about family, but it's really about music, and we don't really get to talk about, you know, other things. So for me, it's you know, I think I have the best seat in the house.
Yeah.
So
I can see what the platform is like. I think it's beautiful. Yeah.
yeah, it's great, man. And you know, it's nothing really like this out here for us to just talk and share what we have. Only from New York City can you get this kind of jazz. So I mean, and we know we have listeners in 165 countries tuning in, checking this out. So
Beautiful. Yeah.
it's really, really great, man. But that being said, I know our time is limited, but I want to squeeze these next two songs in. But that last one, Preaching to the Choir, was from your album, from the Smoke Sessions. Can you just talk about that briefly?
Well, you know, coming out of the pandemic, when everyone was like, you know, freaking out about what was it called? COVID. You can catch COVID, right? So, you know, of course, I teach in a couple schools, and at that time, you'd have to get a bunch of COVID tests and everything before you go back to school, and so it turns out I had I had contracted COVID at some point.
Mhm.
So, wow. I said, if that's what it is, it's like a mild cold. I can't believe, you know, everything's shutting down over this, right? That was my attitude about it.
Mhm.
And sure enough, a few weeks later, I'm like starting to get these pains. I'm like, what the hell? And so middle of the night, got to get out of bed, which, you know, as you know, we frequent sometimes, you know, man gets out of bed in the middle of the night, takes you 3 seconds. You get up, go to the restroom, do your business, and go back.
Right.
Oh no, man! I was like in such pain. I was
Wow.
like debating with myself. Well, maybe I should just like let it roll, and you know, because it was serious pain. So
Wow.
I throw myself onto the floor and then try to pull myself up into the bed and to stand. It was like excruciating pain. So my son and daughter, they found a specialist for me to go see, because I went to my regular doctor, and she gave me a prescription of some kind of steroids and something else, and sure enough, it curbed the pain and made it tolerable. But when I went to the specialist says, "Oh, anyone in your family have rheumatoid arthritis?" I said, "No." She said, "Well, you do." I said, "What?"
Wow.
I said, how did I get this?" I said, "Well, a bunch of people out of COVID has been getting these like weird diseases unrelated to things in their family, and we don't really know. And we'd like you to join a study group here at NYU." And I was like, "Wow, okay." So she gave me another kind of medication, and I felt symptom free, pain free. It was like, wow. But you know, this medication was I never liked taking any and all that stuff. So, but I was on it for a couple of years and everything was okay. And you know, I would get a 30-day supply of this medication, and I have a tour, and I'm like, I needed, you know, my tours are longer than the 30-day supply, you know. Well, your insurance only covers 30 days. I'm like, this is kind of like, so I thought to myself, you know what? I'll just go buy it. How much could it be? $200 or $300? Oh, no, man. It's like $4,600 or something. I'm like, you got
$4,600 for 30-day supply?
in the United States.
Wow.
Abroad, it's something else, like, $100 abroad. So I was like, you have got to be kidding me. So I had a few days where I wasn't able to take the medication. And it was no pain. I was waiting. So then when I got my supply, I was like, well, let's see how long I can go without this before the pain comes back. Because I was like, when I did that record, Preaching to the Choir, I was so grateful that they found a medical solution, which was, medicated. Because before that, I was like, I can no longer play at a high level in order to be a fine arts musician. It's not going to happen. And I was like, man, what can I do? I guess trade stocks or some. Jeez, Chris. So yeah, it was like that, and so I went without this. And at the time, I was in the process of losing a lot of weight. So my weight went from 291 to 209. And so that's a significant amount of weight. And in fact, if I went a few months into the other calendar year, I had gotten up to 298. So let's just say, 300 really. Mm-hmm. And to lose 90 pounds is significant. So all of a sudden, I was able to get off that medication and off blood pressure medication. So I'm on no medication. And, I was just like, I was faced with not being able to play when I did that record. I was so grateful that I had that medical solution to be able to do it. But since that time, I've in fact even stopped taking the medication now. So, but when I did that, that's where that whole session came from. I was just really grateful to be able to do it.
Oh, great, man. So that's all that session. So Preaching to the Choir, the title track is from that experience.
Yeah. And I it's funny. Never like to talk politics, especially when it's public. And so the dialogue that me and many of my friends and peers have, we all in agreement on certain things. And it's like when you're speaking to each other, it's like you're preaching to the choir, bro.
Right.
So that's where that's coming from.
I hear you. Well, man, you have an audience out there and you've been sharing your music and it's been great, man. I know our time is limited, but I think we have time for one more at your request. We're going to play Sophia Marie. And let's check that out. Sophia Marie. Thank you.
Oh.
Yes, that's Sophia Marie.
Yeah, so my daughter.
Beautiful. That's a beautiful song.
Thank you.
Beautiful song. Wallace Roney, man, we miss him.
Man, how good does he sound on that track?
Yeah. Yeah. You talking about COVID and you getting sick during COVID. We lost him during COVID.
Listen, he called me up and he said, "Hey, man, James is in the hospital." James meaning Jimmy Cobb.
Mm.
I said, "We got to go see him." I said, "Wallace, let's do it tomorrow." He said, "No, we got to go tonight." Translation: come pick me up in New Jersey, bring me to the hospital so we can go see him. I'm like, "Wallace, man, I just can't make it tonight, man." And he said, "Man, we got to go see him." So I said, "Can't make it, man. I'll do it tomorrow." So he calls me back later that night. "Man, I saw James. We got to go see. You got to go see him, man. He's not going to be around much longer." I said, "Really?" I said, "Okay, I will definitely go see him tomorrow." And so I tried to go see him, and they said people can't come to the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Try to call Wallace back, can't reach him. Next thing I know, this fool is in the hospital.
Wow.
And went quick. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
So, and at that point, it was very much a mystery, all the stuff about COVID. And
Right.
I was, wow. And so that really got my attention. I was really nervous and scared for the world. It's like, seemed like, man, this stuff. And so, Sonny Fortune checked out. I don't even know if he had it. He just checked out.
Yeah, it was a crazy time.
Yeah.
But you produced a great project, reflecting on that time. And the audience loves the music. You're good in the hood, man. I love you. Somebody said earlier that they heard you play at the university, and ever since then they went and got all your music.
Oh wow. Thank you.
Yeah. So Vincent, it's been a pleasure having you on the show, man. Again, it's been very informative for me, just hearing your story and catching up with you. I haven't seen you in a while, and I know we're going to be playing in April, so I'm looking forward to that gig.
Dion, I'm really looking forward to that. Thank you so much, and thank you for having me here. And tell Mel I said thank you for having the platform, and I appreciate being on it.
Yes, but before you go, let our audience. I know you have a book out also, so
yes.
tell us about your book and let our audience know how they can get the book and how they can follow you.
Okay, the book is called Logic and Critical Thinking in Jazz Improvisation, and it is a book on improvisation techniques and styles. And you can find it at Sheer Music, spelled SHER music.com. You can find it on Amazon.com. It's under my name. And it's a pretty thick book, but it's lays out 4 improvisational styles that I use, and they can be applied to a person that's intermediate, as well as advanced professionals would love having a different perspective on how to approach some things. So anyway, please consider checking out the book.
Great. And how can our audience follow you? How can they stay in touch?
Well, if I was more savvy on my internet stuff, I have a web page, I think, vincentherring.com. And of course, I'm on Instagram and I'm on Facebook.
Okay.
And I think I'm going to start something else, that my internet person keeps telling me I should do. And I'm like, really? Yeah, do you think those other ones are not enough already? So, I'm certainly not a person to post a lot. I know in this day and age I probably should be, but I'm busy trying to write a second book, so not so much time for those things. But yeah, you can follow me in general on those mediums that I speak of, Instagram and Facebook.
Great. Before we leave, one question there's an audience member asking, were you ever at Newport? Your sounded so familiar.
Yeah, I was at Newport. I've been there a few times. The last time I was there was with I played Lewis Hayes and Cannonball Legacy Band. We played there. but I've been there after that. I can't remember who I was with. Want to see something really funny? If you type in Lionel Hampton and then type in my name, Newport Festival, you'll see me in like 1980, I don't know, maybe 85, 86. And I was playing with Lionel Hampton's big band. And in fact, I think I was in the band still. Yeah. I thought I had left and then come back to do a few gigs, but no, I was probably still in the band at that time. So anyway, it's just funny to see it.
Great. Well, man, you have had a continued success to you. Have a great evening, and thank you again for taking the time out of your schedule. I know it's a hectic schedule, but we really appreciate you.
I appreciate it. Look forward to seeing your son, man. I heard he's as tall as you now.
Yeah, he's getting there, man. He's up. He's doing his thing. I'll send you some videos of him. Check him out.
Okay, sounds beautiful. And thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, Vincent, man. All the best. Okay. All the best. Take care. Man, it's always beautiful hanging out with us here at Sounds of the Diaspora. You never know what you're going to hear and learn from our guests. That was the great Vincent Herring sharing his story with us. And we had a great time, and his music. So, we thank Vincent for taking the time out of his schedule. Join us next week as we bring you another saxophone player. This gentleman is someone that I've known for a while. He's been an artist in residence in our mentoring program here in the Virgin Islands, and he's a New Jerseyite. His name is Mr. Anthony Nelson on saxophone. So join us next week as we bring you his story and his music to Sounds of the Diaspora. Thank you for joining us. You guys take care. Have a blessed evening. All the best.